In 2010, the World Bank published a report called Natural Hazards, Unnatural Disasters, which stressed that while natural hazards such as hurricanes or tsunami occur as the result of natural forces, their impact on societies, the environment and the economy is human-made and the result of poor decisions, those which have been made without care of understanding for people, the earth or the future conditions. The risk of a disaster event is determined by the type of hazard, such as a flood or a pollution event, who or what is exposed, and the vulnerability of the population affected. So for example, if you're in debt, new to town, renting and living in a poorly built house in a low-lying area, the risk from a flood event is higher than if you were living in an equally poor building on a hill. In this situation, the exposure to the flood is the only thing that changes. The hazard of flood remains the same, as does your vulnerability, or your ability to cope due to the lack of social connections or savings that would help you respond both prior to and after the flood. Now, while disaster risk can be calculated in potential mortality or loss of human life, it is most often discussed in terms of economic impact through the need to rebuild houses and infrastructure and the loss of potential earnings. Now, while protecting property such as buildings, crops and livestock are an important part of our design considerations, keeping people safe is our primary goal. Disaster risk is compounded by drivers such as climate change, changes to the built environment such as higher density urban centres, reduced urban drainage or poor quality housing. Urbanisation, inequality and climate change are the most significant drivers for disasters, no matter where in the world they take place. Permaculture gives people at the household and community level the ability to actively reduce disaster risk through a number of approaches. As a design approach, it gives us observation and design tools that help us reduce our exposure to disaster. By observing and recording a sector analysis, we can make appropriate design decisions, such as siting a property above the 100-year flood level or using a reed bed water system as a wet barrier against a fire sector. Good permaculture design works to reduce our exposure to hazards, but good permaculture practice helps us reduce the vulnerability of ourselves and our communities. It does this by increasing our ability to cope with the impact of disasters and emergencies. Coping capacity is increased by becoming closer with our local community, living a healthier, more active life, producing our own food, learning to build and repair things, and dealing with financial systems and governance in new ways. The systems thinking approach and community involvement supported by permaculture helps us to identify potential disaster drivers and start making positive, influential changes in our lives. Working to reduce inequality, limit climate change and its effects, supporting smarter city design are all ways in which we can support our communities and regions to limit the risk of future disasters. These broader considerations about community involvement and designing a better world are part of the broader context in which we reduce disasters and are worth keeping in mind. However, the major output of this module is for you to develop disaster risk profiles for the two most likely hazards that will directly affect your property and the local area, and to use them to guide your design decisions. Now, if you can pull out your sector analysis and local climate and geographical observations, you'll be able to use them to start work in the next video. We'll also be referring to the site disaster profile worksheet in the next video, so make sure you have a copy available to refer to. The download link is available below.